So, we have continued to see some concerns raised from the sort of bro-podcast sphere that had been pro-Trump leading up to his election. And specifically over the issue of immigration. Which, to be honest with you, is a little bit of a surprise to me because there are lots of things in Trump 2.0 that I think it's reasonable to have been surprised by. His aggressive approach to immigration is not one of them. They were literally holding up "mass deportation now" signs at the RNC. Nevertheless, it's good to see that there are concerns being raised here. You know, with people who maybe will be influential among a large, sort of more independent base. Let's go ahead and start with Tim Dillon. And some of what he had to say. You're collecting people that are law-abiding, that have been in the country a very long time, that have committed no crime. You're picking people up in church parking lots, at high school graduations. It's inhumane. And I think a lot of people feel that way. But in fairness to the Trump team, they did think of this and say, what if we put them all in a prison surrounded by alligators? Would that make it feel more humane? Like, I think Trump and his people were like, sure. People find these raids to be a bit abrupt and, you know, soulless, unkind. But if we then took the people we swept up and put them in a prison built in an alligator swamp, would that make people feel better? It's a great way, I think, to show that it's not just a heartless policy. It's a policy that we've put a lot of thought into. So there you go. Tim Dillon's take on Alligator Alcatraz. Like, oh, your policy that was already dreadfully unpopular of snatching up like innocent people who've been paying their taxes. Been here for years and years from a Home Depot. This will make it better. I'm sure that will show that we're serious about this. And he goes on a whole thing, too, about how, you know, there are many other types of deadly animals throughout the U.S. Like, why not put them inside of like a shark? A literal shark tank down in the ocean with the sharks swimming around? Maybe we could get some like grizzly bears involved. So in any case, it's interesting to me, Emily, that, I mean, first of all, it's interesting to me that anyone was surprised by this direction from the Trump administration. Given that you've got Stephen Miller running the show. And running the show and even more. Like, I think he has completely taken over this portfolio in a way even beyond what was the case in the 2016 Trump. But given the first administration, given the rhetoric on the campaign trail, and you know, given the like explicit promises that were made that this was going to be a focus. I know Trump claimed that. Oh well. This will just be focused. One didn't say just be focused on criminals. But he made it seem like the focus of the policy would be on a mass criminal illegal alien population. They said, first, over and over again. That's what we would do first. That's definitely not the case. But also, they projected. They made it seem like, you know, the vast majority of undocumented immigrants were in fact criminals. Which is just not reality. So, I think that's where, you know, they're running up against the difference between the projection of the Trump campaign and the way this was portrayed. And then the actual reality of seeing moms, dads, neighbors, people who have, you know, lived in this country and caused no problem, committed no crimes, done all the right things, Even people who were actually following the process and trying to, apply for asylum and like showing up for their hearings and all of those things. This is the same thing that happened really in the first Trump administration as well. Where, mass immigration has never been more popular than it was during the first Trump administration. Which is why then you had every 2020 Democrat running on a very pro-immigration and a very, relaxed border policy. And Biden particularly talked tough about border security and all of that. But they were telegraphing. The signaling over and over again was that this would be a much more lenient and welcoming administration. And so, yeah. We should roll this Rogan clip as well. Because it echoes Tim Dillon. To your point, Crystal. This is one of those political, I don't want to say conundrums. But it is kind of a conundrum for the GOP. Which the Republican base is very different from the rest of the country. The Trump base, I should say, actually, is very different from the rest of the country on the question of mass deportation. So, it polls very differently depending on what you're looking at. When you get in, and you've pointed this out a lot. When you get into the specifics of what, quote unquote, mass deportation looks like, people are less supportive than when you just use the phrase mass deportation. But this is really important to the Republican base. People like Steve Bannon and Stephen Miller believe that you never have the same country again if there isn't a process of mass deportations. Over the course of the Trump administration. And their definition of mass deportation is really undoing the entire Biden era. Which will involve, basically, if you wanted to take 8 million. If you wanted to deport the 8 million estimated people who came in at least during the Biden administration. First of all, that's not all illegal immigration. A lot of it was legalized by the Biden administration. Which created the asylum process and, well, not created, but expanded the asylum process and made it really easy. They did not detain people. And let them into the interior of the country while their asylum hearings waited because there were so many people. And so to undo that, you're talking about tens of thousands of deportations a week. If you wanted to do it in a year, it would be like 20,000 deportations a day at least. So, it's not going to think they always knew it wouldn't be what the public looked like. It wouldn't be congruent with the public's expectation when you hear mass deportations. And you see that juxtaposed with constant rhetoric about criminality and all of that. It's going to look different in practice. And they want to go further than just rolling back what happened during the Biden administration. You have, a memo from the DOJ talking about, let's prioritize denaturalizing U.S. citizens. That goes far beyond. You genuinely. Stephen Miller is a genuine ideologue who wants a white ethnostate. And anyone who doesn't fit his category of what an American should be, he thinks should be fair game to get out of the country. And so that is, the project that they're embarking on. And as aggressive as the raids have been so far, you now also have the one big beautiful bill that floods ICE with resources. Where they're supposed to have 10,000 ICE agents. The largest federal law enforcement agency. As I said before, Larger than the military budget of places like Brazil and Israel. Just a huge influx of resources. Not to mention an extraordinary flooding of money to private prison contractors who will be setting up these, mass detention centers. So in any case, you've already got the Tim Dillons and the Joe Rogans of the world somewhat uncomfortable with what's going on. Let's go ahead and roll. What Joe Rogan had to say about this? Well, there's two things that are insane. One is the targeting of migrant workers. Not cartel members. Not gang members. Not drug dealers. Just construction workers showing up in construction sites and raiding them. Gardeners. Yeah. Like. Really? Or students. Or Palestinian students on college campuses. Or not. Like. There's a. Did you see this video of this? Turkish student at Tufts University that wrote an essay and then. There's video of like ICE agents like. I don't know. Is that a woman? Yeah. 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 What was her essay about? It was just critical of Israel. Right? Just critical of Israel. Yeah. I mean. And that's enough to get you kicked out of the country. I mean. There's a long history of anti-colonial activism in U.S. colleges. That led to. South Africa changing and all of that. And I think this is a continuation of that. And Emily. It seems to me like there have been a few things that have really touched a nerve for people in the Trump 2.0 era with regard to the immigration policy. Number one is the what they were talking about there. The kidnapping of Romisa Oster. Which happened on camera. You have these masked ICE agents. I think they were ICE agents. I don't even know what federal agency they came from. Who came? Multiple of them. Grabbed her off the street. And then lo and behold. We learn what did she do? She wrote an op-ed for the student newspaper calling for the university to divest from Israel. Like. The most basic. First Amendment protected call to activism. And Shay think the visual. And not anti-American at all. No. Yeah. And I think the visual of seeing her snatched off the street for that. I think that was really searing for people. Totally agree. I think Kilmargo Garcia and what happened there. He really became. As you had him and hundreds of others swept up with no due process and. The Trump administration admits that this was. They shouldn't have done this. That this was a wrongful deportation. And yet. They're so committed to keeping him in this horrific slave labor camp dungeon in El Salvador. I think that you can see in the poll numbers that the favorability of Trump on immigration really begins to decline there. And then the other thing that really touched a nerve. For some reason. Was these Home Depot raids. And you have a moment with. Reportedly Stephen Miller goes to ICE and yells at them and says. Why are you focusing on the criminals? I want to see you go to the 7-Elevens. I want to see you. He name-checks Home Depot specifically. And then you see an escalation in the tactics. That's what also leads to the anti-ICE protests in places like LA. But something about picking up the Home Depot day laborers really struck guys like Joe Rogan. Guys like Tim Dillon. Because I think it feels so familiar. These are not like, you know, the scary, theoretical gang members who were out there terrorizing communities. It's like, you know, Rogan has probably been to that LA Home Depot where that raid happened. He may have used some of those day laborers for some project around his house or something. Like, it just feels so suburban and so familiar that it's impossible to caricature these guys as some like nasty menace to society in the way that the Stephen Millers and the Trumps of the world want to. Well, I was going to say. And this is another example of where that gulf is significant because Rogan and Tim Dillon are wealthy independents. You talk to the kind of red meat Trump base. They are going to be all for Home Depot raids and the Stephen Miller. And then Donald Trump is not quite on board with the Home Depot raids. By the way. Because he's clearly been hearing from the hospitality industry. Construction industry. And is himself not big. Not sold on. What we saw from. Was it? It was like Vallejo. Where you had workers running through the fields when ICE was. Trying to make arrests. And that gulf is. I mean. It's not going anywhere because you have Stephen Miller making this his single priority. This is Bannon's. Like. If Bannon is ranking his priorities. This is probably the literal top one because they actually believe that this is like the Jenga. Block that once it's pulled. Everything crumbles. They really see it that way. And because of that, Donald Trump can, you know, say, we're going to be lenient with hospitality workers and agricultural workers, as much as he wants. But if they're going to be funding a bunch more detention centers. Like Alligator Alcatraz hasn't taken any money from FEMA so far. Which is interesting. Because DeSantis did it on his own. Now. ICE has all of this money and is going to be building more detention facilities. And most of those migrants who came in during the course of the Biden administration. If they are. Quote unquote. Criminal. It's because they crossed the border twice. For example. Like they got deported and then recrossed. Or they didn't go to an asylum hearing or whatever it is. Like that's the. What? That's what hasn't been followed. And for the average American. They're not going to like seeing those people rounded up and put in. Detention camps. Let alone like shoddy ones that were constructed in a week. But the Trump base both demands it and loves it. And that's a huge political problem for the administration. Here's what I would say. Yes. The Trump base. They are not going to complain. They're going to delight in the, you know, Alligator Alcatraz and the Home Depot raids and the, you know, whatever Trump does. They're going to be on board with. But whatever Trump does. They're going to be on board with. So. If he wanted to moderate this policy at this point. He could. And I don't think he'd face any significant backlash from the base. There's no indication that there has ever been any significant backlash from the base over any Trump policy. You know. So. I don't see him as they are beholden to him. He's not beholden to them at this point. And maybe there was a different point where that was the case. But I mean. The famous. Like. I could shoot someone on Fifth Avenue. It's true. It's true. His base is with him. They will justify anything. We talked about the Epstein thing. Even though there's been all this online. Oh my God. The Epstein and Trump's going to reveal it and blah. 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 Him turning on a dime and being like. Ah. No client list. Nothing to see here. They're going to find a way to justify it. So. I don't think he's really held hostage by the base. I think he has. Well. He's held hostage to the extent that Stephen Miller is very powerful in the administration and Stephen Miller wants to do it. That's the point. I think he has outsourced this to Stephen Miller and other things as well. By the way. And Stephen Miller's running it. And he's not really concerning himself too much with the details and. You know. Feels like. Okay. Iran on mass deportation and. You know. The only time he cares is when. Yeah. Some rich business owner calls him and is like. My farm workers are getting rounded up. Or. I don't have my seasonal hospitality workers. Or whatever. And he'll express some concern. But then. You know. Days later. He'll go back on it and Stephen Miller is still doing his thing. Yeah. I think Stephen Miller is obsessed with the details of the policy. But not at all concerned about the politics of it because they see this. At least most of them see this as a one-term administration. Ideologue. Yeah. They see this as the second term. Trump doesn't have to run again and that this is their last chance to. Walk a lot of this back. Walk what happened back during the Biden administration. And just as we were talking. Crystal. Tom Homan. Did a gaggle at the White House and he said that deporting 3,000 people a day is. Quote. Not enough. And said. For those that say 3,000 a day is too much. We have to arrest 7,000 every single day for the remainder of this administration just to catch the ones Biden released into the nation. And as we were just saying. I'm sure that math actually adds up. Because it was a really significant wave of immigration. The most significant since Ellis Island. As David Leonhardt had. Written for the New York Times not too long ago. So yeah. I think those numbers add up. But the only people that really is going to relish seeing that is the slice of the country that is hardcore. Die Hard MAGA. And the rest of the country. It's not as though they're just going to be like. Whatever. They are going to be revolted by it and is going to be a huge shot in the arm for the Democratic Party and the left as they try to mobilize in opposition to Trump 2.0. But Stephen Miller understands that that's a risk that they, from his perspective, have to take for. Like. To have the policy outcome that he and Tom Homan want. Yeah. The political risks they believe are well worth taking. Well. And Stephen Miller was going to be an anti-immigrant zealot regardless of what happened during the Biden administration. How many immigrants came in? Because he thinks it should be a white ethnostate and he believes in. He does. He believes. I mean. Even Trump. I think. Like has acknowledged that Stephen Miller only wants white people here. Like. That is his policy. And you increasingly have people like Charlie Kirk who are out admitting. Like. We need to have zero immigration from the What do you call it? The third world. Which again is just like, we don't want brown people here. So, you know, the mask is kind of off for some of these guys and he is in control. Like, it is his. Ultimately his policy and he is running it. You know. In terms of the, you know, the political fallout. The last point I'll make on this is it's not just horror at what is being done to other people. It's also that when you have any federal law enforcement agency with this large of a budget, who are doing things like snatching people off the street because they wrote an op-ed and who are saying they're going to prioritize denaturalizing American citizens, you very quickly realize that this thing does not stay confined even among the immigrant population. Even among the naturalized citizen population. You are constructing a mass surveillance state. A mass police state. And that will have reverberating impacts for everyone. We already have seen American citizens who got picked up and detained for hours and hours. Because they, you know, had the wrong. Were in the wrong place and had the wrong level of melanin in their skin and looked like they might be an immigrant. And even if they had their papers, they weren't believed or they weren't listened to and were detained. But this, the increase in the ICE budget, means those things are going to be happening more and more regularly. Palantir wants to build their big database of absolutely everyone. I mean, this is a mass operation that, if the Stephen Millers of the world get their way, like I said, it's not just going to be about the way it impacts immigrants. Although that part is important as we, you know, are all human beings and deserve some level of human rights and dignity. It's also going to impact everyone in this country. So, I think, you know, we're kind of on the cusp of seeing that. And I think that the best hope is just that there's a tremendous level of incompetence and they're not actually able to marshal the level of resources. That the flooding of resources that they're being given. I mean, that's a pretty decent bet. It's a pretty. Is a strong possibility of that. We've never seen a deportation effort on this scale in modern history. I mean, 7,000 a day per Tom Homan's point. Yes. They have a lot of money. But they also only have what? 3.5 years at this point to do it. It won't be popular with the public. So. It's an uphill climb for them to be sure. That much we know. The conversations we're having today cut to the very core of what kind of nation we want to be. It's a debate not just about policy and numbers, but about people and principles. It's about whether we see the gardener at Home Depot or the student on a college campus as a neighbor to be understood or a threat to be removed. The path of mass deportations, fueled by a massively funded enforcement agency, leads to a place many Americans would not recognize, a place where fear outweighs compassion and where the rights of one can be easily sacrificed for the political goals of another. But there is another path. It's a path that remembers that America, at its best, has been a beacon of hope. A nation built and enriched by generations of immigrants. It's a future where we address our challenges with wisdom and humanity. Not with alligator-filled prisons and street-side abductions. It's a future that affirms the dignity of every person and upholds the promise of liberty and justice for all. Not just for a select few. That is the beautiful, more hopeful future we can choose to build together. If these critical discussions matter to you, And if you believe in the power of independent media to hold power accountable, please support our work. Take a moment to hit the like button on this video. Leave a comment with your own thoughts below. And most importantly, subscribe to our channel and click the notification bell. By joining our community, you help us continue to bring these vital stories to light and ensure that these conversations are not just had, but heard. Thank you for watching.